big fan of Sandra Bullock here. I really like Miss Congeniality. It's actually not one of my favourite of her films because she's done so many brilliant ones. But certainly the first Miss Congeniality is probably one of her more popular ones, and I completely understand why. When it comes to the second film, Armed and Fabulous, it's good. It's not great. It's lacking a lot of the uniqueness and the fun and the comedy that's present in the first film that makes it brilliant. We do, however, have Gracie Hart, played of course by Sandra Bullock, and that makes this film watchable, even a little likeable, because as a character, she's really fascinating and really interesting, but the narrative itself never really moved me. This was released in 2005, directed by John Pasquin, and stars, of course, Sandra Bullock as Gracie Hart. We do have a pretty great supporting cast as well. We have Regina King, William Shatner, which is pretty fantastic. Really great cast. And that's certainly not something that drags down the quality of the film. I think it is literally just the narrative isn't that gripping or compelling. So I'll read the description from IMDb to give you a little idea of what it's about. And this says, after Heather Burns and Stan Fields are kidnapped, Gracie Hart goes undercover in Las Vegas, Nevada to find them. So it's relatively interesting. The fact that it's a comedy, it's a crime comedy, an action comedy. And, I'm not the biggest fan of action films, but I do like thrillers and crime-based films. And when you throw comedy into the mix, comedy might be my joint favourite genre with horror, usually the recipe is going to be pretty sweet. This is alright. I think the action is relatively intense. It doesn't give us too much of a lead with, what's happening and how to solve the case. But at the same time, it's not exactly unpredictable. I think it's a pretty safe narrative where you can probably guess how they're going to get from A to B. In terms of the setting, being set in Las Vegas, I liked it. It gave us some, great setting, great locations. I think that was a really good decision, and it worked really well with the narrative. And there's just something about Gracie Hart being in Las Vegas that also works really well. Hart as a character in this is still fabulous, but not as much so in the first film as she is in the first film. The first film is just far superior. So as a sequel, certainly it's not as good. And let's be fair, that's usually the case with sequels. It's very rare that a sequel will be superior to the first film. But if I were to view this on its own, as a film, let's say a film that wasn't a sequel, then I'd say I'd probably like it more. Because if it wasn't a sequel, it would be quite innovative, it would be quite an interesting approach to this kind of narrative. And Gracie Hart, if this were my first introduction to her, I think she'd be fabulous and amazing and everything perfect. Which, to be fair, she is. So as a sequel, not that great. As a film on its own, it's pretty good. It ticks most boxes. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It's just not as good. Which, I guess, is fair enough, because the first film is great. Costumes are particularly brilliant. The costumes... Costume design is by Dina Appel. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Basically, the film has everything going for it. It ticks all of the right boxes. The narrative's interesting enough. The execution is fine, if a little predictable. Characters are interesting enough. Gracie Hart is obviously brilliant and Bullock is fantastic. As a sequel, not that great. Viewed as a film on its own, not that bad.